In this video, we're going to be talking about theoretical and experimental probability. Pay attention because we are going to jump around on a couple pages. To define theoretical probability, it is an event that is expected. It is the expected probability and can be found with a formula. So for example, what we've been working with, the number of possible outcomes over the total outcomes, where experimental is an event where an event is determined by carrying out a simulation or an experiment. So the number of times desired outcomes occur over the number of trials in the experiment. So let's talk about the difference. If you flip a coin, what is a theoretical probability that you will flip a heads? Well, one side of the coin is heads out of the two sides. So your theoretical probability would be 1/2. So theoretically, if you flip a coin 10 times, how often should you get heads? That would be 50%, or 5 out of the 10 times. Is this theoretical or experimental probability? It's theoretical. It's what should happen. Half the time you should get heads. The other half you should get tails. But if you actually perform an experiment by flipping a coin 20 times, will you always get heads 10 times? Why or why not? So your answer should be no, because the coin can land on either side when you flip it regardless of the theoretical probability. So is this theoretical or experimental probability? This would be experimental. Suppose you performed 2 experiments. In the first one, you flipped a coin 20 times and it counted the number of times the heads came up. In the second experiment, you flipped a coin 2,000 times and counted the number of times heads came up. In which experiment are you more likely to get heads 50% of the time? In this case, 2,000 times. Because the more you flip the coin, the better the chance that you can land on heads 50% of the time. So 2,000 times, because there are more chances it can land on heads. So the difference between theoretical and experimental probability. Theoretical is what should happen. Experimental is what does happen when you have an experiment. And let's talk about the law of large numbers on the next page. Law of large numbers is an experimental probability states that as the number of trials increase, the experimental probability gets closer to the theoretical. So in the example that we were just talking about, if you flip a coin 20 times versus 2,000 times, which one would be closer to the 50% of the time of heads being there? It would be 2,000, because you have more trials that you have performed, so the closer it's going to get to your theoretical probability, which is you will see heads 1/2 of the time, or 50% of the time. So it states, think about it. Which experiment would be closer to the theoretical probability? Mary rolls 2 dice 6 times to see how often she gets the sum of 4, or Mary rolls 2 dice 60 times to see how often she gets closer to the sum of 4. The second example, where she rolls the dice 60 times, is going to get you closer to your theoretical probability. Before we do the experiment below, I want you to flip 2 pages so we can practice an actual situation property that has already happened. In situation 1, Amanda used a standard deck of cards and selected a card at random. She recorded the suit of the card she picked and then replaced the card. That's a key word right there, replaced. The results are in the table below. So she got diamonds 7 times, hearts 9 times, spades 11 times, and clubs 3 times, making it a total of 30 cards that she chose. So based on her results, what is the experimental probability of selecting a heart? So the probability of selecting a heart is going to be 9 out of 30. Because remember, it's how many times it occurred out of your total trials. Once you simplify both of these by 3, you're going to get 3/10, which is also considered 30%. Remember your FDP unit, where you can take a fraction, make it into a decimal, which is 3/10, and move your decimal 2 places to the right in order to get your percent. To go from decimal percent, you move right. Percent to decimal, you move left. Let's look at the next example. What is the theoretical probability of selecting a heart? In a deck of cards, 52 split 4 ways gives you 13 diamonds, 13 hearts, 13 spades, and 13 clubs. So the probability of selecting a heart is going to be 13 out of your 52 cards. You can simplify each of these by 13, giving you 1/4, which also is 25%. So you can compare the differences between the experimental and the theoretical probability. Pause the video and try 3 and 4. In problem 3, it wants to know the probability of a diamond or a spade. So you need to add together how many diamonds you have and how many spades you have. So in the experimental probability, I got 7 diamonds and 11 spades, giving me a total of 18 possible outcomes over the 30 trials. Simplify by 6 and you get 3/5. This is 60%. In the theoretical probability, in example 4, you have 13 diamonds and 13 spades and a deck of cards, giving you a total of 26 out of your 52 cards. Simplify, and this gives you 1/2, or 50%. Are the results similar? Yes. Follow the directions from your teacher on what experiment to do next.